What's up, y'all? It's Ty. In this video, we're going to be looking at Hakeem Olajuwon and his case for the greatest peak in basketball, looking at his absurd post move. Shout out to Thinking Basketball. Now, when I did my David Robinson video, make sure to go check that one out on the channel. We saw a little bit about Hakeem and his footwork, his post moves, unlike anything I had ever seen. So I'm interested to see how his absurd post moves were only his second best skill. What was number one? His defense? Passing? Let's find out.
Many people view Hakeem Olajuwon's 2 championships in the middle of the 90s as a kind of interim title belt on rent while Michael Jordan swung away at curveballs. But
I mean, it's impressive still.
Maybe Hakeem should have been in the best player conversation before Jordan retired. Maybe his dazzling scoring repertoire unlocked something special in the playoffs. And maybe that incredible defense made him one of the very best players of the three-point era.
Man, that guy just went up on Hakeem that many times in a row, needed to quit. These videos are fantastic. Shout out to Thinking Basketball. These videos are fantastic, man. Great videos. Let's get it.
I was playing other sports, soccer, volleyball, field hockey, high jump, more of an all-around athlete. But the coach was telling me that basketball is your game.
Hakeem's defensive highlights have the grandiosity of some NFL films montage. No one in NBA history recorded more block shots than Hakeem Olajuwon. Even though he was closer to 6'10" than a true 7 feet, his incredible combination of athleticism and timing made him feel like a very tall Oliver Kahn.
Oh my gosh!
On the basketball court. This sequence epitomizes how impregnable he could be at the rim. Scottie Pippen turns the corner with Dream pulled up top, and Otis Thorpe has no chance against the explosive Pippen. But when Chicago runs this with Hakeem as the low man, Olajuwon spits the dunk back in Scottie's face, and Pippen has a runway and is above the square, and he still goes and gets it.
It's ridiculous.
It's not any easier trying to glide around Hakeem because that long right hockey stick finds the basketball as he twists in the air. The first cornerstone of his shot-blocking brilliance was his accuracy targeting the ball with that domineering right hand. Notice the hand tracks with the path of the ball as it's shot. Even in his younger days, when he was slightly less polished, he was incredibly accurate targeting the rock. And growing up as a handball player primed him to zero in on the ball like this. Hakeem didn't play basketball in Nigeria until he was about 16, so it was really volleyball that groomed his jumping technique. He'd patiently prepare to spring up and wait till the precise moment to commit to a shot. He holds until Sean Elliott's airborne, then spikes this thing. This is subtle and requires great reflexes, but when Olajuwon moved around the paint, he was constantly ready to jump, which allowed him to attack after a shooter left his feet. It's on display.
I mean, that's useful because then, I mean, pump fakes aren't going to get you if you wait till they leave their feet.
Here, where he slides over to contest, but when Elliott hesitates, Hakeem shuffles his feet into a new jumping position and sends it back in his face.
Yes, in the face!
This is an incredible skill, allowing him to slide into position for a save, yet he doesn't jump, instead controlling his body and waiting for the moment the shooter finally puts it up. He probably learned some of this playing his third major sport growing up, soccer, where fittingly he played goalkeeper, foreshadowing his career as the NBA's all-time leader in blocks. Hakeem registered at least 5 blocks in 35% of his playoff games.
Come on, man. And 35% of his games, he has 5 blocks. Is this like what Wemby's going to be like?
From 1986 to 1994.
It's ridiculous.
And in those last 2 years, had 5 in nearly half of his postseason contests. When he was younger, he was more of an athletic force, but still fairly raw since he picked up basketball at such a late age. And by 1990, his defensive techniques were more polished, and he still had that whirlwind athleticism. But his 1993 season blended some sage tricks with his incredible body control that was so rare in someone his size. For example, Hakeem learned to lurk closer to the ball than most big men of the illegal defense era. You see Joe Klein point here because Olajuwon should be above the foul line, but Dream was so quick to the ball he was rarely called for these violations. With David Robinson at the top of the key, Hakeem loads to the ball at the edge of the legal boundary, the bottom of the little circle, so his quick reaction time can erase a layup. This subtle positioning was especially valuable on the weak side. He's not glued to Robinson and was always tracking the ball, ready to materialize at the rim. Poor Sean Elliott.
He's so quick. Like, that's the thing I'm impressed with. He goes from point A to point B and then can jump.
Olajuwon's quick help was a nightmare for opponents who were reluctant to shoot when he went into fly swatting mode with that right hand. He tracked threats well and was so quick to come into the lane and suffocate any attempt around the basket. When Hakeem went to the bench, opposing teams could finally breathe. All of a sudden, those high percentage shots around the hoop felt much easier. Back in the game, he swarmed to the ball, even with his man up high, and that response speed generated more high leverage contests than any contemporary that I've tracked.
It's ridiculous.
He didn't get to every threat. He pounces on this back cut, but it's a touch too late. And every once in a while...
But still, like, that's a tough shot for whoever's shooting the layup, because in the back of their minds, they know Hakeem's coming over.
He missed a cutter coming through the lane. But he was usually quick to rotate, plugging up gaps in the back line. Although by 1995, he was a bit slower, sometimes arriving late on these save attempts from outside the paint, and a slightly slower motor meant he wasn't itching to jump at everything on command. Hakeem's agility helped him defend the perimeter too. For one, he was rarely ever attacked by wings on switches. They also didn't run as many pick and rolls in the 90s as they do today, and coverages weren't as developed then, yet he was still comfortable stepping out and taking on smaller players in these spots without too much of a price to pay.
He has to double team in that situation.
1993 play, Hakeem realizes there's too much space between him and the ball, so he closes it quickly, then sort of lingers near the lane so he can blow up another shot attempt.
Oh my gosh! The contests he gets are nuts.
He blitzes the ball handler to completely blow up the play, although maybe he's too overzealous hounding the dribbler into the backcourt.
He's quick,
Still,
man.
This fantastic mobility allowed him to erase weaknesses.
I'm stunned by how quick he is.
In these outdated ball screen coverages. He's really low and lunges at the ball from this crouch, then somehow slides back to contest.
Come on, man.
He's
That's
hugged
ridiculous.
up to Shaq on this pick and roll, but that fluid footwork shifts him into position so he can seamlessly transition from sliding to jumping, and preternatural timing stamps the layup. The culmination of Olajuwon's volleyball timing, soccer agility, and handball accuracy led to the most important block of his career. This John Stark shot is for the title in 1994. Hakeem slams on the brakes, then somehow recovers backwards and times this leap off the wrong foot to save the season. This matrix recovery looks half impossible, but he does somehow block it to force a seventh game that Houston would go on to win in large part because of Olajuwon's offense, which may have been even more gravity bending than his defense.
I mean, I knew his offense was elite. Defensively, my goodness, Hakeem, that's ridiculous.
I remember one time I gave him a ball, and he just laughed. nice elbow, brother. And then he came out and gave me a
And by Shaq means the dream shake, Hakeem's twirling array of head fakes and spins that set up so many of his moves. His blend of size and balletic footwork made him a deadly isolation weapon, and these were skills he possessed early in his career, drilling crazy fadeaway jumpers, or faking one way to freeze defenders and then spinning for a jump hook. That agility and balance gave him an edge over
because it's like if you can go either way, it's so tough.
Bigs of that time. But shot selection was an issue in those early days, launching into triple teams at times, and in other cases just firing deep jumpers early in the shot clock. By 1993, Hakeem's scoring game was more polished and under control, carving out shots like some sort of basketball ballerina. All of his moves flowed together, which made them so difficult to slow down. A spin one way, then back the other, throw an up fake, and then a hook. From there, he could...
But that's tough, because when you get a defender off the feet, it's over.
Fake the hook to set up his fadeaway to the opposite shoulder, And at around 250 pounds, he was able to pivot with power and find clean shots in traffic. Even double teams couldn't always stop his fadeaway because he could twist and contort into the shot comfortably. And Dream could also face up from the perimeter and wheel his way into those.
Like, that's over two guys. It's over a double
Michael
team.
Jordan once called him a 7-foot guard because Hakeem's handle was secure enough to drive into open
He kind of looked like Joel Embiid. Is that crazy to say? Like, Joel Embiid looked like him?
space, and that quickness was a challenge for most opponents, who worked really hard just to keep up, only
He's
to be
quicker than
juked
Embiid,
right
though.
into Highlightville.
His footwork
After
is good,
all
though.
of that, Big Ben still had to worry about his spin. Oh, that is so nasty. Hakeem's
Filthy.
array of pirouettes and dizzying pump fakes crescendoed in the 1995 Western Finals against David Robinson, who was often left on an island to defend him, inviting Hakeem to shoot into that single coverage. This series wasn't actually that different from Olajuwon's normal scoring these years.
Look at that shot.
There were a number of those savage fadeaways, some of which were still really difficult and didn't always go in, along with an assortment of drives, up fakes, spins, and hook shots.
Just ridiculous.
A lack of double teams made
Do you
life
realize
easier
this footwork at 7 feet tall, how hard that is to
for
do?
Hakeem, who obviously welcomed the chance to dance with Robinson in an isolation game. Olajuwon is one of the few players who improved his scoring numbers in the playoffs, and from 1993 to 95, he was just behind the all-time scoring juggernauts in volume while scoring on positive efficiency.
Pretty good shooting, too.
As a
yeah.
primary scorer, he compares favorably to other contemporary big men. However, the brilliance of Hakeem's shot-making was a double-edged sword. These moves were difficult for defenses to take away without hard double teams, but they also were hard shots to make.
That's what I'm saying. Some of these shots are ridiculous.
Most players manufacture easy points against weak defenses, but are forced into harder, low-percentage shots against elite ones. But Hakeem's attempts were already difficult in the first place. He just made a bunch of them, and since he could generate these shots almost on demand, stronger defenses couldn't really take away his scoring because he was already taking those hard shots.
Just ridiculous.
This kind of resilient or inelastic scoring meant Olajuwon's numbers weren't dented that much when he faced stiffer defenses. Compared to other players in this series, Olajuwon shows some of the smallest change.
I mean,
among
it's still a
volume
change, but it's not very much.
scorers when facing high-end defensive teams versus facing weak defensive teams. One way to limit Hakeem's scoring was by sending effective help that forced him into a pass. He was dangerous enough that defenses frequently doubled him, and that created plenty of outside shots for teammates. But Olajuwon was
Is that Maxwell?
not a natural passer. His instinct was to catch and immediately shift into a scoring move, which is why he jacked up so many wild
What
shots
in the
when he was
world was that shot, Hakeem?
younger. In 1993, Hakeem said he finally grew comfortable trusting his teammates to knock down their open shots, and coach Rudy Tomjanovich implemented a more Olajuwon-centric offense, with shooters around Hakeem in a kind of spoken wheel model. He was more patient in spots, allowing the defense to commit to a double team before making a decision.
That's a good pass.
And this substantially helped his playmaking during these years by punishing defenses with some basic passing instead of his own scoring. His balance and body control allowed him to flow from his scoring dance steps into passes if he felt too much pressure. This is a stark contrast to Robinson in the last episode, who could get locked up by hard doubles. Hakeem, on the other hand, easily segued from a dream shake to a pass. This helped replace some difficult shots with passes. He misses a teammate in close, but at least finds the open shooter.
I mean, in my opinion, that's the better pass.
And here he feels the double, misses a more advanced interior pass, but still calmly kicks it to a teammate. Now, even in those years, Olajuwon still took his fair share of double-team shots, where he left shooters stranded. His instinct to just catch and immediately look to score was still strong even at his peak. But I think a bigger weakness was a lack of vision. This looks like it's in his periphery, but he misses it.
That's such a tight window, though. Like, he's really nitpicking Hakeem right now because these passes, I think Hakeem's making the right reads. On the last 3, he's like said the interior pass was there and he kicked out to the perimeter. I think all have been good reads.
He rarely ever hit these kinds of passes.
This one's open.
It's still there.
That one's open. I agree. You got to hit that one.
When he shoots. Some of this was a byproduct of playing with his back to the basket and not turning and surveying the court.
Like that pass. Come on, man. Do you realize the low percentage of that pass? I think Charles Barkley is standing right in the paint. Just kick it out to Vernon Maxwell.
But Olajuwon wasn't someone who mapped the floor or kept an eye on advantages like this. His primary focus was reading the double.
Again, that would have to be such a quick pass. That's on the guy on the perimeter feeding the post.
Team, and here he spins away from it and loses track of where his teammates are. To be fair, he could hit passes if he felt an extra defender on a drive, and he certainly had the athletic dexterity to drop dimes in those situations.
So that's my thing. You catch it on the interior. Sometimes it's tough.
Still, more of his passing was out of the post, and the results from there were certainly mixed. Maximizing Hakeem's playmaking really required shooters who were spaced around the three-point arc.
I feel like, yeah, Hakeem's passing was okay.
And this likely raised his offensive value in 1995 when the NBA shortened the three-point line. Higher percentage shooters amplified Hakeem's playmaking by charging more for those double teams in the post. In 1995, the Rockets set a new NBA record for threes in a season, making nearly 8 per game at 37%.
Which back then was a lot.
Then in the playoffs, they were closer to 9 threes per game at a hefty 39%. The record they broke was held by the 1994 Rockets, who made 5 a game in the regular season and then nearly 7 at 36%.
But I mean, they were still shooting a lot of threes before that.
Playoffs.
So.
And you'll never guess who held the playoff record before that. The 1993 Rockets.
See?
They made 5 per game at 37%.
They still could shoot it.
Some of those playoff percentages might be boosted by hot shooting, but playing inside out was clearly the viable way to construct an offense around Olajuwon. And the results were pretty good, but not great. The shortened line in 1995 made this a more attainable strategy, basically doubling the number of legit 35% three-point shooters in the league overnight, but Houston's offense wasn't great because of Hakeem's passing limitations. He didn't look for extra passes like this naturally.
There's no way he doesn't
and so
throw
it's
that
unclear
pass.
how he would fit next to another offensive star. The other tools were there to fit next to a playmaking perimeter weapon. First, he was a really solid mid-range shooter, and that allowed him to play the pick-and-pop game effectively. Dream was nimble enough
his shot
to
looks pretty, man.
move into some of these shots, and the data we have on his long twos near the end of his career suggests he was fairly efficient from the outside. He wasn't as big and explosive as someone like Robinson, either as a lob threat or headed downhill, but his agility made him a strong finisher, and this meant he was always a scoring threat as a roll man, using his gracefulness to carve out finishes.
His footwork
near the rim.
is elite, man.
Furthermore, Hakeem was also a fantastic offensive rebounder.
Oh my gosh.
Some of this is related to his shot blocking, where he could
That's like he springboarded off of number
move
14,
and jump
but
in one motion. The other part is that he just constantly pursued the ball on misses. And all those jukes and shakes, along with his physical strength, made him a pain to keep off the offensive glass. He was particularly dangerous sneaking in from the perimeter, swimming past 2 players here to steal Shaq's board. So the building blocks were certainly there for Olajuwon to play a fairly effective off-ball role. It's just a question of how many post touches and hero ball shots he was willing to forego.
man, some of these shots are just crazy.
His defensive prowess alone makes him interesting to build around because in theory he guarantees his team a passable defense, and with the right pieces, he can anchor an elite
so fast.
one. Before Hakeem's defense
I'm not gonna lie, Hakeem defensively was
the
enough.
slide in 1995, those first 2 Tomjanovich teams held opponents about 4 points below their regular season efficiency in the playoffs. That's around the 70th percentile historically, which is impressive for not fielding a defensively slanted team like Detroit's Bad Boys or the Twin
Bad
Towers
Boy
Spurs.
Pistons.
Some of this impact stemmed from Hakeem's man-to-man defense. His shot-blocking instincts made
Such a
shooting
tough
around him
shot.
tricky, while his agile feet kept quicker big men in front of him. His balance and timing gave post players a ton of trouble, which stood out in
His
the
second jump, too. He got off his feet, and his second jump is absurd.
1994 finals against Patrick Ewing. Ewing struggled to find any clean shots when isolated against Olajuwon and ended up posting an unheard of 39% true shooting in that 7-game series. Hakeem had incredible hands too, probably from the handball, and one of his defensive tricks when guarding the post was to time up a quick push flick once his man started dribbling. Sometimes just getting the ball to the post was a chore against him because he gobbled entry passes better than just about any center.
That's a tough thing to do, man.
Ever. He was constantly repositioning himself into a slight overplay to take away the passing angle, then quick enough to toggle back to the other side in a bait and switch.
It's ridiculous.
All of his handsiness produced historically great steal rates. Among big men, he posted 8 of the top 100 seasons in steals per possession, including the highest
Look
on
at
record
him run in transition.
in 1989. Hakeem also borrowed a little Bill Russell move where he kept his left hand low to target passes when he left his feet. Back in episode 2, we saw Bill Walton limit other All-Star centers as scorers, but Hakeem was even more impressive against All-Stars at his defensive peak. He held them over 5 percentage points below their normal true shooting while denting their volume. Numbers matched by only a few of the other defensive.
Look at Wilt, though. Wilt was special, man.
Giants.
I'm telling you, Wilt was special.
Since we have plus-minus data going back to 1994, we can get an idea of how valuable all this defense was. Using that same hybrid metric from the last episode, his impact looks great, but it's short of the all-timers. Keep in mind, though, his 1993 numbers were likely even better, and he seems to improve in the playoffs. The box score numbers...
That's one thing for Hakeem that he's got going for him is that he gets better in the playoffs.
For those postseasons, view him as around a top 15 peak, and that's with limited information to capture his defensive worth. Given how much of Houston's success was driven by a strong defense, I think it's fair to assume much of Olajuwon's
What was that guard thinking, man?
impact was defensively driven, which is hard for the box score to capture. In a sense, Hakeem's isolation scoring and monster defense
Offensively was elite, though, too.
were functionally closer to a young Wilt Chamberlain. Players who can carry subpar offensive talent, but who might not help good offenses as much. Hakeem's three-point shooting offenses did generate better results than those early Wilt teams, but I have some doubts about how he'd scale up next to another high-end talent.
I think if it was a guard, he would be tough in a pick-and-roll game because his defense is so elite.
Given his passing limitations and shot selection. On the other hand, he did have the tools to add off-ball value as a rebounder and pick-and-roll partner, while providing an
put him next to John Stockton and see what happens.
inside-out option for any offense. And his prodigious defensive timing, mobility, and aggressiveness made him arguably the best defensive player of the three-point era, and, at his apex, one of the very best big men of all time.
I genuinely, Hakeem defensively was special, and he had an offense to go with it. That's so rare. And I say it nowadays, who protects the rim and offensively is that good? Giannis, maybe? I don't know. Hakeem was so special. And I don't like him saying, with another, a top-level guy, he might not have been as good. I think Hakeem would have leveled up. I genuinely do. Hakeem, impressive. Drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're new, and as always, man, I love you guys. Have a blessed day.